We're going to be drawing the nose from these 3 different angles and 3 different values. The first step to simplify drawing the nose is to break up the reference picture and the box you'll be drawing in into these 4 different quadrants. Then I'm going to begin looking at where everything lines up compared to the lines that I drew to separate into the quadrants. So I'm looking at the width of the nose here, where the outside of the nose lines up to, and then I'm looking at where those highlights and shadows on the sides of the nose are and where the placement of the eyes will be. So then I'm keeping it simple with these simple shapes first. I'm drawing a circle for the center of the nose, and then 2 circles on the outside of the nose to represent where the nostrils will be. And then I'm starting to look at the placement of the nostrils, so where those 2 darkest circles are underneath, and then outlining along the bottom of the nose and looking at where the outline around the sides of the nostrils are at, and then starting to place in the outline of the highlights and the outline of the shadows. And then from there, I'm blocking in the darkest values first, making those more of a medium tone, and then I'll go in and layer those darker as I'm working. And then slowly layering in those medium tones as well, trying to leave anywhere that's white or the lightest highlights, the white of the paper. Remember, instead of outlining the nose, to think of it as 3 different planes. So you have the center plane that's typically the lightest or the highlight, and then the 2 outside planes. Now in this specific reference picture, the outside plane on the left, before this was flipped upside down, is the lightest value. So make sure that you are looking at where the lightest value is, and then the plane in the middle is the medium tone, and the darkest is the plane on the right side of the nose. Now I did flip this upside down so that I can gain a different perspective, so make sure you're flipping your reference picture upside down every once in a while. So again, you can see the lightest is the left side of the nose, medium tone in the middle, and then the right side is the darkest value. Now I'm starting to look at the details around the nose and the shading, so really take your time building these layers and really darken those darkest values to create a good amount of contrast throughout the entire nose. Now I'm moving on to the second one. This is at a side angle, so it is going to be slightly different. I'm measuring the angle of the nose with my pencil in the reference picture and comparing it to the angle that I have in my drawing in order to make sure that that angle of the nose at that slant is as accurate as I can get it. And then I'm continuing to compare each of those in the quadrants, so looking at where the outside of the nose lines up in my reference picture, comparing it to my drawing, flipping it upside down as I start to shade to really see those values and where to block in the darkest values. There's a highlight on the outside of the nose that I'm going to be sure to leave light, which runs down the entire length of the nose. And then the inside of the nose here is the darkest value for the most part, so I'm making sure to really shade that in. And then underneath the nose is really dark as well, so shading that darker value, fading it into the lighter area on the nose. And then starting to fill in the background to create the outline of my nose. So I'm not using a harsh outline, but I'm using the placement of where that highlight is next to a shadow to create the outline of the nose. And I'm starting to really refine details, blend out my shadows into my medium tones to create a nice smooth fade. Outlining areas that need an outline to separate values, and really building my layers as I'm working. And now I'm moving on to the last nose, breaking this up into the 4 quadrants, starting to outline with simple shapes first. So I outlined just a large circle to represent where the bottom of the nose is. The bottom of this nose is at a slight angle, so make sure that you're measuring that angle. Hold your pencil up to your reference picture, bring it down to your drawing, double check those angles. And then I'm starting to shade in those darker areas on the outside of the nose, which is going to create the outline of my nose. So again, I'm not using a harsh outline, but I'm using my shadow placed next to these highlights to create the outline. As you're working as well, bring in those medium tones, start to really finalize the details. This picture has a lot of highlights, so make sure that those areas are the lightest. You can always erase those in last with an eraser. A kneadable eraser is the best choice for this, as you can be very detailed with those fine, small areas that you'll need to outline or erase for your highlights. And I'm just continuing to blend out those shadows, fade them into the highlights, really refine and bring in details as the last step when I'm putting together that nose. So again, take your time, layer things, break it up into the 4 different quadrants to compare the placement of where each part of the nose is, and look at the value change and where you can bring in highlights and shade the darkest values and blend those out into the medium tones.